Hero Tales from History by Smith Burnham. Alfred, the greatest of the Saxon kings. Over 1,000 years ago, the king of the West Saxons on the island of Britain, now England, had 4 sons. Alfred, the youngest of these, was his father's favorite. When his boy was only 5, his royal father sent him to Rome to be confirmed by the Pope. After Alfred came back, his queen mother died, and his father made a pilgrimage or religious journey to Rome, taking young Prince Alfred, with many court gentlemen, soldiers, and servants. On their way, the king and his train were given a royal welcome by the King of France. Alfred's father fell in love with the beautiful young daughter of the French king, and asked her hand in marriage. Her father consented, so the royal wedding took place on the Saxon king's return from Rome. Alfred's new mother soon became very fond of him. Young as he was, he had learned to play the harp, but when he was 12 years old, Alfred had not been taught to read. Saxon kings and princes thought that most kinds of learning were for priests and lawyers. When gentlemen made contracts or signed law papers, they did not write their names, but set their signs and seals thereunto, as is done today in legal documents. All the books were written on parchments in Latin. One day, Alfred saw his French stepmother reading a roll of parchment on which Latin words were printed by hand in many colors. As the lad admired it, the queen told him she would make him a present of the scroll as soon as he learned to read and understand it. He went right out and coaxed a monk or priest to teach him Latin, and he soon became the happy owner of the beautiful parchment. Learning to read opened a new world to Prince Alfred. He wrote verses and songs for his harp, and began to compose both words and music of hymns to be sung in the cathedral near his father's palace. When Alfred was 14, his father died. Each of his 3 older brothers became king, one after another, and died within a few years. Alfred was 22 when the last brother died and left him to be king. Some rough people called Danes from the north countries across the sea had landed on the island of Britain, and the Saxons were compelled to give battle to them so as not to be killed or made slaves to those rough Northmen. So Alfred had to fight to keep on being king. When he began to reign, he ruled like all the other kings he had known. His father and brothers had treated people as if they were made only to work and pay their way, like cattle, so Alfred did the same at first. The fierce Danes kept coming over in larger numbers. In a hard-fought battle, Alfred was defeated and most of his army was slain. Flying for his life, the young king found a hiding place in the hut of a swineherd, a man who tends hogs. This man knew who Alfred was, but kept the king's secret from his wife, who thought the stranger was a poor soldier from the Saxon army. Many stories are told of what the king did while he lived in the hut of this swineherd. These tales have changed so much, all the hundreds of years which have passed since Alfred's time, that they are called legends. The best known of these is the story of the king and the cakes. Once, when the housewife was going out to do some work, she asked him, while he was fixing his bows and arrows, to mind the cakes she had left baking in the ashes of the fireplace. The distracted king's mind was on higher things than coarse meal cakes. When the woman came in, she found them burning. She was so angry that she called Alfred a good-for-nothing beggar, and added that if he could not pay for what she gave him to eat, he ought to at least look after her cakes a little while. Alfred had the good sense to see his own conduct through the poor woman's eyes. So instead of being angry or telling her who he was, he said gently, "I am sorry I was so careless. I will try not to forget again." A soft answer turneth away wrath. Alfred had read in the roll of Proverbs in his Latin Bible. It may have been during the long months he spent in the home of this shepherd that the humble king decided to translate the best parts of the Bible into the Saxon language so that the people could read it. Another story is that Alfred stayed in the hut alone while the family were away fishing. He had only a loaf of bread to last until their return. A beggar came and asked for bread. Alfred broke his little loaf in 2, gave the man half, and ate his half with the beggar. The swineherd returned that day with fish enough for a family feast. In the night, the beggar of the day before appeared as an angel to the captive king, and said that God had seen how Alfred had humbled his heart, so that he was now fitted to rule his people wisely and well. The Danish army was now encamped not far from the king's hiding place. Encouraged by the vision of the shining pilgrim, Alfred started out to see for himself how strong the enemy were and what they were going to do. So he disguised himself as a wandering musician playing a harp. He played and sang for the Danish soldiers, and was soon taken before their fierce leader, like David with his harp before King Saul. The Danes were so pleased with him and his music that they asked him to stay with them. As soon as he had found out all he wanted to know, he took up his harp and left the camp of the enemy. The Danes invited him to come again. Hurrying back to the swineherd's hut, Alfred sent word to the leaders among his people that he was alive and ready to go on with the war against the Danes. The people had been in despair, for they had believed that their brave young king was dead. The Saxon chiefs came at once and knelt to King Alfred. When the poor woman realized who her guest was, she fell on her knees and begged him to forgive all she had said to him. Alfred lifted her tenderly from the ground and told her he would reward her and her loyal husband when he was safe on his throne again. The Danish army was astonished early one morning to hear 3 trumpet blasts and to see a great army of Saxon soldiers marching to meet them, led by that wandering minstrel. Of course, the Saxons gained the victory and made the Danes promise not to come and attack them again. They agreed, but did not keep their word long. After that, instead of waiting for the Danes to land in Britain, King Alfred fitted up a fleet of ships so that he could go out and fight them on the sea. This has been called the beginning of the British Navy. Then Alfred improved the years of peace by making laws which allowed the people more rights and privileges. He invented a simple clock of candles by which the people could tell the time of day. He rebuilt the towns that had been destroyed in the war and trained his people not only to fight, but to till their farms. He made wise laws and did much to educate his subjects by having books translated from Latin into Anglo-Saxon, the language of the Saxons. Best of all, he translated the Bible into the language of the people. Because of all the acts which taught the people how to make their lives better and happier, he is known in history as Alfred the Great. In one of his histories, King Alfred wrote what he tried to do in his own life. My will was to live worthily as long as I lived, and, after my life, to leave them that should come after my memory in good works.